Originally, this was going to be a kind of vacation wrap up video where I was going to talk about all the books that I just read while I was on vacation. I read four books, that being Piranesi, Killers of the Flower Moon, Beach Read, and Anji Kills the King. And I was going to do a video where I talked about all of them in sequential order, and I have abandoned that idea basically because, well, I have pretty brief thoughts on three of the books. Pretty much three of the books I read were good to great. And then I read one book that I did not like at all. And from the title of this video, you can probably guess which one it is because I decided to make a dedicated review to that book. And that book is Anji Kills a King by Evan Lycombe. Anji Kills a King is a debut fantasy novel from this author, and I would just like to get a couple disclaimers out of the way. Disclaimer number one is apparently Evan Lycombe is a book talk or booktube influencer. Maybe he hosts, I think, a book review podcast. I haven't seen any of his stuff. So I'm not coming to this book from like a point of view of a fan or anything. The only exposure I've had to him is I think he was on a podcast episode from somebody else that I listened to where he was talking about publishing his first book, and so he pitched Anji Kills the King, and I went, "Oh, that sounds cool," and so I pre-ordered the book, and it's kind of been sitting on my shelf for a while. But I'm not coming to this from like a place of fan. I don't know Evan or anything like that, so there were no expectations for me for this book other than just the premise of the book itself. I'd also like to quickly, before I get into my list of negatives here, that I completely understand that this is a debut novel. And so I feel like I might sound mean, but I don't mean to be that way. I want this to be more constructive criticism than mean criticism, even if I start to get a little passion because I didn't really like the book. But I'd like to recognize, to Evan that like he wrote a book and I have not written a book. And I think that this right here is better than anything I could write right now, even though I'm going to get pretty negative. That being said, I really, really did not like this book almost at all. Let me get into some positives real quick before I get into the list of negatives. My first positive for this book is that it is efficient and short and brief. And what I mean by that is, it's only about 340 pages long. And I like that. It allowed me to finish the book in a couple of days. It took me longer than I thought I would. I thought I was going to fly through the book because it's so short, but because I was struggling with it, it did take me like 3 or 4 or 5 days when I thought it would only take 1 or 2. But I liked that, even though this is a debut, that clearly there was some effort that went into making sure it was as concise and efficient as possible. And I like that. So even though I didn't like the book, it didn't take me more than a week's time to read it. And so I didn't feel like it was a huge waste of my time. I don't regret that I read it. Second positive, I know this isn't Evan's work, but the cover is awesome. I really like the cover art. Thirdly, the title. The title's pretty good because one thing you can say about Anji Kills the King is that in this book, the titular king killing definitely happens way faster than it does than when you compare it to some other series that are named after killing kings. If you know what I'm talking about. Okay, let's talk about things that I did not like about Anji Kills the King. Where do we start? Okay, number one, let's start with the characters because I think this is one of my biggest problems with the book. I think the characters are pretty lame, unfortunately. And you're going to see this as a common theme throughout the whole book as you read it. It's not that anything in Anji Kills the King is necessarily outright bad or awful. It's all, how do I word this? When it starts, you start from a pretty familiar place as far as characters and world building and all that stuff goes. And you're kind of excited to see, okay, what else is in store? What is underneath the surface of these characters? What is underneath the surface of this world? What is underneath the surface of this magic? And what you realize as you get farther and farther into the book is that there really isn't anything under the surface. Yes, more things are revealed about the characters later in the book that supposedly is supposed to, change your view of them. But the characters are so cliche and so standard that you can see everything about these characters coming from a mile away. Let me get into some light spoilers here. So Anji kills the king in the first page of the book and then runs away. We don't know, technically we don't know why she killed the king. We don't know what motivated her to do this. And when you first read it, you're like, oh, okay, like, I'm guessing probably it's something like, her parents were probably killed and her family was mistreated by this oppressive regime and it led to the deaths of her parents or something. And okay, that's probably like a good springboard for this character. I wonder what else is going on with Anji. And as you read the book, you realize, oh no, the reveal of Anji's backstory was just that her family lived in an oppressive regime, and her parents died, and she blames the king. That's it. I mean, I feel like that's just a really standard character, right? There's no exploration of how Anji feels about the revenge that she took. The only thing that is explored is that she realizes, oh, by killing the king, I accidentally made the regime even more oppressive because of other politics I didn't understand. But there's no exploration of how she feels after she did the revenge. There's no exploration of really anything. The only thing that you get from her throughout the book is that she's angry that she's captured, and she's upset that she's going to be killed, and she hates the hawk. I guess I don't know. Like it starts out with a standard character type, and you're like, okay, like where else is this going to go? And it's actually just what it presents on the surface. There was no shock to learning about Anji's backstory. When Anji starts revealing more and more of her backstory, either through telling the hawk or just through flashbacks, there's nothing that's surprising. It's all very bog standard. It's all very, oh yeah, she was oppressed when she was little, and oh yeah, her parents, they didn't like the regime, and so they got killed by the king. And that's it. And you're like, okay, like there's nothing more to her there. It's just weird. Like it makes me think, why even include the flashbacks at all if it doesn't really reveal more about her or make her more of a standout character than she was? Because you don't really, I mean, you learn events about her past, but you don't learn anything about her. And that's kind of my biggest problem. The second main character of this book is the hawk, and it's the same thing with the hawk. Again, you want to know what more about the hawk makes her a compelling character, because when she's presented to you, she's this old hardened mercenary who seems to be jaded with where her life is ended at, and who seems to suffer from some kind of trauma and PTSD from events in her past, and who has now become an addict to deal with that. And the moment she's introduced, you get a pretty clear indication, okay, like even though Anji thinks that she's this menagerie member, it's very clear she's not part of the menagerie anymore, and she has her own goals going on. Okay, so pretty early on, you start to think, all right, is she working for the rebellion or something? Probably. That seems the most likely. But okay, let's see where it goes. Oh, yeah, she's just a jaded mercenary who has PTSD from her past, and now she works for the rebellion. There, there's nothing more there than what is presented, and that's the biggest problem. Is you keep waiting for the potential to be realized, or for something to be revealed that recontextualizes the whole story, and it never happens. You realize, oh, the characters were just the way they were, how they were presented, and nothing more digs under the surface. Once again, you learn more events about her past, and why she's an addict and why she works for the rebellion, but you're not stupid. Like you could I piece those together just reading her chapters. I'm like, oh yeah, she's the jaded mercenary who's tired of all the killing and violence she did, and now she wants to work for the rebellion, but she's an addict because she has PTSD. And so when you get to the final couple chapters of the book, when the hawk like finally reveals this, you're like, yeah, I freaking knew that. Like I'm not dumb. Like I could piece that together. The only thing that changes is you learn that the hawk and Anji have kind of a past, but again, you can piece that together. You can see it coming from a mile away. It's just, I don't know. This is my biggest problem with the book, is that, and you can really see it in the characters, is that they're very standard cliche archetypes, which isn't a problem for me. I like archetypal characters, or even tropes, right? The jaded mercenary, the teenage girl getting revenge, right? All these things. But there's nothing more there. He doesn't do it with a twist. He doesn't add anything onto this. It is just how they're presented. It is just a standard girl gets revenge, jaded mercenary comes to capture her. They go on a Last of Us type road trip, and they bond. I'm going to put that in quotation marks because we'll get to that later. Over the course of their journey, and become friends. That's it. Like you've read that a million times. You've played that in a video game before. You've seen that in a movie before. That's nothing new, and there's no twist on it that like makes it different. It is just what it presents on the surface. I guess I could talk about some of the supporting characters. There's not really any. I mean, there's supporting characters, but they're all very like they show up for a chapter or two, and then they get killed, or they disappear, or they move on, and they're all very like they have like one trait to them. The deranged religious lunatic, the mean guy who's evil, the nice old friend from the past. Like this is like as far as the characters go. Again, there's nothing else going on there. Secondly, when it comes to the characters, I also want to point out this: the characters are just super unlikable. And let me preface that by saying not the good kind of unlikable, because I want to make it clear that I don't feel like I have to like every character that I follow, and I'm down to follow unlikable characters. I mean, some of my favorite series have really unlikable characters, right? The Expanse, or the Farseer trilogy, or the Live Ship Traders trilogy, or Red Rising. I'm just looking at my shelf back here looking for options, here, right? Like there's a lot of really great unlikable characters that I look to follow. Oh, anything in the First Law, right? All the characters there are super like unlikable. But you can be unlikable in a good and compelling way. And Anji and the Hawk are not unlikable in a good way. They're unlikable in an annoying way. In a, oh my goodness, I'm actively annoyed the entire time that I'm reading this character. Why won't they shut up or just think about what they're doing or saying for like 2 seconds? Or why are we having this same interaction over and over again, right? Angie's being infuriating and the Hawk tells her to shut up. How many times do I have to read this? Oh my goodness, can these characters just be quiet and just act like normal people for a second? And that never happens. Anji is just, my goodness, Anji is just insanely, she's just stupid. She's so dumb in this book. It blows my mind how stupid she is. The entire first half of the book, she continually thinks that she can escape at certain moments when she knows the kind of restraints that the Hawk has put on her, and she knows that she hasn't broken some of these restraints. So I don't know why she thinks, oh yeah, this is the time where I could run away. After I tried the exact same thing 10 pages ago and it didn't work. Hey, I tried to run away in the third chapter of the book, and oh, I have this magical restraint on me. Man, I have to figure out a way to get around that. Oh, 3 chapters later, the Hawk went into a bar. I should get on the horse and run away. Maybe if I just go a little faster, I can break the magic. Anji, I thought you were supposed to be trained in Maxia by your mother. Not like fully trained, but you're supposed to know things about this, right? Like it's part of one of your character deals. And it's constant like that throughout the book where she knows like the checklist of the 3 or 4 things she needs to take care of to escape. And she takes care of one of them and goes, awesome, I can escape. And you're like, what? No, you can't. Like you haven't taken care of the other things. What are you talking about, Angie? Like, why are you so dumb? And then secondly, she's just infuriating. Like, and I know this is purposeful. So I know people, if anybody sees this and they like this, they're gonna come at me and be like, oh well, Angie's supposed to be unlikable. And I know she's supposed to be unlikable. But again, I feel like there's a line where you go from good unlikability to bad unlikability. And I think Angie crosses into bad unlikability. I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling about the characters at this point. Angie is super unlikable. The Hawk is whatever. I don't know. And just the character interactions are repetitive. I mean, like I already said, most of the book is Angie being annoying and Hawk telling her to shut up, or Hawk coughing up black goo from like Prometheus, and Angie being like, "Oh, are you okay? You're transforming." And the Hawk being like, "No, I'm fine." And she's like limping and hobbling and being all cripple and such until she has to fight. In which case, usually she kind of always turns it on immediately somehow through her addiction, and it's fine. I don't know, like it's repetitive. The characters are annoying. Their arcs are predictable. There's not really any depth to them because they just present as what they are on the surface, and there's nothing really more there. Um, and I guess I kind of want to explain that. Like, technically, there are things there that develop the characters, but I guess what I mean by they're nothing more than they present on the surface is that they you've just seen these types of characters before. You know what I mean? I don't know if I worded this properly a couple minutes ago, but every character type you see in this book, you've seen before and done better in a different book. And so you get this sense that like you can see some of the inspirations that Lycum is pulling from, but then he just pulls a character and a character archetype and drops it and doesn't do anything with it. And so when you read it and it's just what it presents on the surface, and you're like, well, I guess that means there's something more that's going to go along with this character, and nothing else comes along with that character. You just feel like you watched a lesser version of a type or a story that you've seen before, and that's the problem with these characters. Okay, I feel like I've been rambling about this. Let's go ahead and move on to the world building, I guess. And really, my complaints with the world building are the same complaints with the characters. And to be fair, I'll give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. This is a series, and I haven't read the other books yet because they haven't come out yet. But based on this one book, the world is, again, nothing more than what it presents on the surface. There are things that are alluded to, there are factions that are mentioned, there are rebellions that are mentioned, there are other continents and things that are mentioned. One, we never see them, which is fine. I'm not saying we have to see everything or understand everything. But I guess what I mean is like it feels like a standard fantasy world. The locations that we visit throughout the entire book are nondescript ruins and villages, poor villages. That's all you get. We visit like 3 or 4 villages, and the only difference between them is that this one's a little richer than that one. That one's really poor. this one's by a harbor and there's a bunch of people there because it's a trading town. And this one, they all have these religious fanatics here, and the religious fanatics are a faction going on in the political intrigues of the world. Will we learn more about that? Probably in book 2, but they're just religious fanatics, and they're using their religion as a cover to gain more power in the world. Ooh, this is all stuff that you've seen before, right? Like, I feel like I'm just crazy. Like, you've seen a corrupt religion in literally any other fantasy world or book that you've read, and there's nothing new about this here. There's literally this scene, and it's like the same standard reveal that you get in all of these fantasy books that do corrupt religions, where you see a religious figure, making a speech or doing something religious, and then the characters go into a brothel, and oh, who just came out of that door in the brothel? Is it that priest? Oh my goodness, the religion is so corrupt. And it's like, yeah, like you couldn't have revealed that any other way. Like that's such a cliche way to reveal that. Like, oh my goodness, wow, the priest character is like a kinky guy in a brothel. Who could have guessed? Me, because I've seen that a million times before. Like, I saw some reviews where people praise the allusions to politics in this, and like the all it is yeah, the king died, and yeah, he sucked, but he was the one holding the religious faction at bay, and now the religious fanatics are going to take power and use their religion to control people. That's it, man. Like, and again, like, I like that concept, right? Because I like it in other books that I've read, but Anji Kills the King doesn't do anything more with it in this book. It is just the standard corrupt religion, right? It is the standard fantasy medieval vibe world. There's poor villages with shackles and people, walking around in these with these shacks. And oh, look, there's some rich people and some poor people. And I don't know. It just is so, again, like the characters, you are waiting for what will reveal this world to be more unique or to be more in depth, and it's always just what it presents on the surface. There's this one brief moment where these characters get caught in like a tornado storm or a funnel cloud, and there's this moment where this ground breaks open and like these millions of spiders crawl out of the ground, and I kind of perked up like, ooh, what's this, what's going on here? And as far as I remember, because now it's been a week since I've read it, it's not explained, and I couldn't tell if this is like a normal occurrence, if this storm was magical or not, like a Stormlight Archive kind of deal. I couldn't tell. Maybe that'll be explained later. Maybe it's just a storm and spiders. I don't know where it came from. But again, there are like brief moments where I'm like, okay, like, is something interesting going to happen here? And then it goes away, right? And then it's not addressed. I guess I should talk about the drugs. That's like a big part of the world building here, is that some people take these drugs that are addicting and make you powerful or whatever, but eventually you turn into a monster. And I mean, that's cool, but that's revealed, it's talked about pretty early on in chapters 1 or 2, the implication that characters turn into monsters from these drugs. And then you're like, oh, cool, what's going on here? And no, that's it. Like, people who just take these drugs turn into monsters. Again, there's like nothing more there, right? Like, I kept, because this kept being brought up and mentioned over and over again, I was like, okay, why is this all this mention of these drugs here? And I think it was just there to explain what's happening with the hawk. But I feel like eagle-eyed viewers could pick up those clues about what's happening and understand what's happening to the hawk, and not need the dredgers and the drugs talked about so much, because so much of the book is Angie going like, oh no, she's transforming, we need to get her to wean off the drugs, and the hawk being like, oh, I'm quitting, and then she doesn't quit. And I don't know, I was waiting for some kind of twist to reveal about the monsters. Like, I was waiting for some kind of reveal that they don't actually turn into like brain dead monsters like zombies, but they're actually like sentient beings who still have their humanity, and the Sun Wardens are like, spreading propaganda about them. And that's what I was waiting for. And it's never like, because it was such a big deal, like the Sun Wardens talking about the dredgers and it being this whole thing, and I was like, okay, there must be some twist to reveal, something to give it some kind of depth. And once again, there was no depth. They're just people who take drugs and they turn into monsters. All right. Thirdly, let's talk about something that I never thought I would complain about in a book review. So let me preface this. Hey, you see these right here? These are my Brandon Sanderson books. You can't see it, but under this shelf down here, you've got the Stormlight Archive and stuff. Look, I like Brandon Sanderson as much as the next fantasy guy. His books are really good. They're my gateway into reading all the fantasy that I'm reading right now. And so a complaint that I've never understood when people complain about Brandon Sanderson is they complain about his modern sounding dialogue. I didn't quite understand that complaint. I'm like, why is that a problem? When I reread all the books last year in preparation for Wind and Truth, I kind of got what they were getting. Like, there were some words and phrases that I'm like, oh, I guess I didn't realize that's kind of weird in a fantasy book, But hey, it still doesn't really bother me. Like, it really does. I feel like people are blowing it out of proportion. For whatever reason, that bothered me in Anji Kills the King, and I don't know what the difference is. Like, I wish I could explain this is why it doesn't bother me in Sando, and this is why it bothers me here. I don't know. All I know is that the dialogue in this book was very modern sounding, and it took me out of a lot of any immersion that I was trying to gather for myself, because the world presents as this magical fantasy realm, but characters talk like they're living in modern day 2025. And I just think that's weird. Like, it just pulled me out of it. Like, when we're talking about these drugs and characters say things like, "Ooh, can I get a hit?" Unless I'm dumb and a scholar can tell me that this is how people talk about drugs, through all of history, that's fine. Like, if they talked about it, but for some reason, it just felt like such a weird modern phrase. Like, I'm reading a fantasy book and someone says, "Yo, can I get a hit of that?" It's like, what? They're like, "Oh, just let me." I don't know. It was just weird, right? Like, it's just weird. There's this scene where Angie is looking at one of the monsters in a cage, and has like this weird aside where she's talking to the people who have captured it, and she like has this bit where she's like, well, I don't want to misgender this monster. And like, if I was reading a book that takes place in modern day, like, this wouldn't bother me, right? Like, I read, every once in a while I take breaks, and I like to read modern romance books a lot. Like, I just read Beach Read over vacation, and if this kind of conversation happened in Beach Read, like, I wouldn't bat an eye. But when we're in a fantasy realm, and people are talking about misgendering a monster, I don't know. I felt like it just felt weird. Like, I wasn't like, it just took me out of it, right? It made me think, oh, like, I'm in modern day. And there's a lot of dialogue like that, right? Like, they don't sound like they're in a fantasy realm. They sound like they're in 2025, but they're wearing leather and wielding swords, and they have magic. I don't know. It just really took me out of it. And I wish I almost want to, like, go back and study, like, why that bothered me in this book and not in a Brandon Sanderson book, where that's a pretty popular complaint. That's the only reason I bring that up. And I don't know, like, somebody else who's read both of these authors, like, tell me, what do you think is the difference there? Is there a difference? Am I just being crazy because because I read Sando first, and so it was fine there, and now I've read more and now it bothers me? I'm not sure. I just noticed that bothered me more on this go around. Finally, I guess you could say this is part of characters, but to me, I don't know how to throw this in, so I'll throw it in at the end. So much of the book to me felt like the payoffs or big moments in the book felt unearned. Um, and this gets back to this book being like standard and very cliche, because I feel like this book follows familiar characters along a familiar story that hits familiar beats. And so when the beats come, they technically make sense to me because I've read stories like this before. This is the beat where they fight a monster. Now they've bonded a little bit. This is the beat where they start to open up to each other. This is the beat where they fully bond. Oh, this is the beat where there's betrayal. But the problem is, I feel like these beats happen because this is where the beats are supposed to happen, but not because this is naturally how it was supposed to happen as the story plays out. I'm just gonna be honest. I did not buy that Angie or the Hawk bonded at all. There are like these moments where they bond throughout the story, and to me, it just felt unearned because they hate each other the entire book. And then out of nowhere, it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna reveal my backstory to you. Why? Well, the excuse the book gives is, well, I'm just about to die and alone, and I feel the desire to bond to another human being. It's that human impulse to bond. And I don't know, that just felt like an excuse to have a moment where, well, the characters need a bond, so we're going to throw it in here, and it's just human nature, so they're just going to do it. And it's like, I just didn't buy it. When Angie refers to the Hawk as like her friend at the end of the book, again, I don't buy it. Like, and it's like, oh, she's her friend because she hung out with the Hawk with her old boyfriend, and so now they're like friends. I don't buy it, man. The Hawk mistreated her the entire book. And she also, Angie annoys the Hawk the entire time. Oh, so just because Angie helps her kill a monster one time, suddenly they're like bonded, And I think this is the standard things. Like, this is what the author is writing. This is what they expect. Oh, they're like fighting and they can't come together. Well, they'll come together because they have to fight this monster, and so that will remove barriers. But it didn't feel like barriers were removed. Like, I didn't feel like, yes, this is the natural point. Of course, these characters are opening up to each other. It felt like, okay, the characters are opening up to each other because this is what happens in these kinds of stories. The characters open up. Like, I could feel the author being like, this is the moment where this needs to happen, and even if it wasn't natural, it's got to happen here. And that's the whole conceit of this book. This is a road travel story between two characters who are supposed to bond over the course of the narrative, and I just didn't feel that was earned in any way. I guess I'll wrap up with this, and this is gonna sound insulting, and again, I don't mean it this way. But if this is one of the first fantasy books you read, I can totally see how this would be a banger for you. I just feel like everything I read in this book, I've read in other books first, and those books did it better than this one. This book takes archetypes and standard tropes and cliches and throws them all together, but nothing, I never felt like nothing new came about by mixing all of these ingredients together, right? Because I think a lot of times, if I see a lot of people pulling inspirations from other places, even if a lot of those ideas are unoriginal, usually when you put them together, it turns into something new. And this didn't feel like anything new. It felt like what I've read before. And so if this is one of your first books, I think this would be really great for you. If this was one of your first grimdark books, which is an element of the book that I didn't even talk about, then I think this could totally blow your mind. Not for me. I think maybe you read this before you read other grimdark works. Like, I think I saw a lot of reviews saying that they were comparing this to Joe Abercrombie, and I don't see it, but like, I guess if you read this before Abercrombie, this book would totally work for you, and it'd be a good gateway into Abercrombie. I feel like you could say Anji Kills a King is Baby's first Abercrombie. Um, but nothing that I've seen in this book was elevated beyond what it presented at on the surface in any way. It was just, I was following characters along this plot with no emotional investment and unearned payoffs and lackluster characters and lackluster world building. And so it didn't work for me. I was bored and I was struggling through it. And it took me way longer than I thought to read it. And I didn't like it at all. So I'll wrap up once again by saying I know this is a debut, and I can see the potential, but the potential's not realized yet. And I hope that in some of this incoherent rambling that I've been doing, that there's some constructive criticism in here, and it doesn't come across as just mean, right? Because I normally hate when people are just mean in reviews and say things like, "Oh yeah, the author's trash. A 2-year-old could write better than this." Because I just want to make it clear, I could not write a book better than this right now myself. So, you know, in that sense, Evan Lycom is better than any criticism I could give, because at least he wrote a book and I haven't done that. So, you know, you got to give props where they're due, right? And I feel like he can only go up from here and he can only improve from here. I think going forward, if I were to give any advice, I would say you have your ideas. What makes them unique? What spin could you give on it? What additional depth could you give to something other than just the surface level that you presented here? Because there are a lot of good starting ideas here, but there was nothing deeper to it. It was very surface level to me. And I would also say that um, if you want a beat to happen, either go back and retroactively put it in, but make sure that it feels natural when a beat or a moment of character development happens, and that it's not happening just because this is the moment that happens in the story. I think those are the two biggest things for me. As for the modern sounding dialogue and stuff, I don't know what you do about that, because again, like, it doesn't bother me in a lot of books. I don't know why it bothered me here. So maybe that's just like a me being stupid thing. I don't know. Yeah, people can correct me if they disagree with me on that. Because I read other fantasy books with modern sounding language, it doesn't bother me there. So maybe it was just because other things are bothering me that this stood out to me. I don't know. I'm not sure. So yeah, that was Angie Kills the King. That did not it did not work for me at all, unfortunately, sad to say. But I hope that the series gets better as it goes along. I hope the author continues to write and gets better, because I think there is good potential there. And I guess I would end with, should you read it? Well, I guess if you're just getting into fantasy, this could be a good book. But if you're like me and you've been reading a bunch, then this one I don't necessarily think is going to work for you very much at all.